So in part 1 we talked about how many of our author's ideas have appeared in his previous work, especially that of hive-minded, blended consciousness races. Our author also likes to break tropes and surprise us, so it's unlikely that A Song of Ice and Fire will end traditionally. After all, our author was a child of the 60s, a time where war was more complicated than during the World Wars. In fact, our author has said as much. The final battle, the ultimate confrontation between good and evil, that's what Armageddon is supposed to be, right? Hobbins lifted a pale white eyebrow, said nothing. Which side are we? Sandy demanded. Which side are we? That's one you gotta work out for yourself, friend. This ain't like in Tolkien, is it? That's from the Armageddon Rag by George R. R. Martin. It's an end-of-the-world story involving a band whose lead singer happens to be an albino. The band's music can bind people together into a hive-minded, blended consciousness on the eve of a supposed apocalyptic battle. At one point, the singer even sings Ice and Fire. But let's consider the line, "This ain't like in Tolkien, is it?" In Lord of the Rings, the elves and the Ents and the men all team up against a clear evil enemy. So if we assume George R. R. Martin is more like George R. R. Martin than he is like Tolkien, then Bran is not uniting the children of the forest and men against the others. So what is going on? Well, last time we talked about how Bran has the ability to enter and control other human beings and enslave them. And I'm not overstating how disgusting Bran's control over Hodor is. Like a dog who has had all the fight whipped out of him, Hodor would curl up and hide whenever Bran reached out for him. His hiding place was somewhere deep within him, a pit, where not even Bran could touch him. And it's fairly reasonable to assume that once joined into the weirwood net, that the net would also gain this ability. It certainly wouldn't be the first time that George R. R. Martin wrote about telepathic slavery. In The Men of Greywater Station, a telepathic fungus takes control of some humans, and they're used as pawns in a battle. In A Song for Leah, the Grishka is described as enslaving the Shkeen. In Guardians, the Mudpots telepathically genetically engineer species of protectors. And in Meathouse Man, telepaths use dead bodies as whores, workers, and gladiators. But I'd like to talk about some telepathic slavers that George R. R. Martin often writes about, but never writes about. They're called the haranguin minds, and they're mentioned but do not appear in at least a dozen of our author's stories. You see, most of George R. R. Martin's sci-fi stories take place in the same universe. Martin calls this universe the Thousand Worlds, and he wrote about this universe for over 15 years. In this universe, humanity warred for centuries with a couple hive-minded races in a conflict called the Double War. One of the hive-minded races was the Haranguins, and the conflict led to the collapse of humanity's empire and the near extinction of the Haranguin minds. Now again, this is only the setting of the stories. No George R. R. Martin story actually contains a Haranguin, but the memory of the war and the Haranguins loom over our characters. The last Haranguin minds are thought to be hiding on their homeworld under the earth, waiting for the perfect time to return. So both the Children of the Forest and the Haranguins are hive-minded who fought man for centuries. They were driven to near extinction, and they're now hiding under the earth. The other interesting thing about the Haranguins is they utilized 3 slave races. They utilized Haroun, who are strong warriors, Dactyloids, who are like bats, and Githyanki, who are telepaths. Now in the Pink Letter mystery, I talked about how giants were likely utilized as vessels by the Children's Collective. The legends of old describe giants as blood porridge eaters who ruled the world, which really fits the children and not the vegetarian kingless giants that we have met in our story. So like the Haroun, the giants were a slave race of warriors for the Children's Collective. And we also know that giant bats were utilized by Danelle Lawston, an ally of Bloodraven. Essentially, another slave race. And giant bat skeletons, along with giant skeletons, are found in the Children's Cave. So like the Haranguins, the Children's Collective had a bat-like air force. But it's the third race that interests me the most, the Githyanki. Like the Children of the Forest themselves, they are telepaths. So it's rather interesting that both the Children of the Forest and the Haranguins utilized warriors, bats, and telepaths. And here's the description of the Githyanki. Githyanki, Haranguin slave race, often termed soul sucks by humans, barely sentient, malevolent, and potent telepaths. The Githyanki were capable of bending and twisting human minds, sending false visions, hallucinations, and dreams, strengthening the animal side of man, and warping judgment and reason, all for the end of turning brother against sister. Now the Githyanki never appear in any stories. However, a character does compare the Janshi to the Githyanki in And Seven Times Never Kill Man. Now again, the Janshi are a hive-minded woodland race that worship pyramids. Religious fanatics called the Steel Angels arrive on their planet and start destroying their pyramids and killing them. The Janshi are severely outgunned and can't possibly fight back. But then the leader of the Steel Angels starts receiving visions. A skeptical Steel Angel warns the leader of Janshi treachery. Once, it is said, in the long centuries of war, the sons of Haranga loosed upon the seed of earth foul vampires of the mind. The creatures men call soul feeds. Their touch was invisible, but it crept across kilometers, farther than a man could see, farther than a laser could fire. And it brought madness. Visions, my proctor, visions. False gods and foolish plans were put in the minds of men. The skeptic is ignored, and based on visions, the Steel Angels end up burning their food and killing their children. And this is more or less the plot of Men of Greywater Station. A hive-minded fungus sends a dream to the commander of Greywater Station, and he thinks that an incoming troop is infected. And in the end, men end up fighting themselves. So what am I saying? That dreams and prophecies are bogus? Well, after reading about the hive-minded Greywater fungus sending dreams to convince men to kill themselves, and after reading about the hive-minded Janshi sending dreams to convince men to kill themselves, and after reading about the hive-minded haranguins sending dreams to convince men to kill themselves, and after reading about the hive-minded Grishka sending dreams to convince men to kill themselves, I'm just a wee bit suspicious of the Children of the Forest. After all, dreams, strengthening one's animal side, and mistrust sounds a lot like Bran. I dream of a tree sometimes, a werewood, like the one in the Gods Wood. It calls to me. The wolf dreams are better. I smell things, and sometimes I can taste the blood. If you would only spend more time with the other children. I hate the other children. But what about Bran and Jojen's green dreams? Don't they predict the future? Don't they show Bran his destiny? Do they? Because Mira is certainly skeptical of the prophetic nature of green dreams. So let's be skeptical like Mira is and go through Bran and Jojen's dreams one by one. Bran's first dream occurs in Bran 3, A Game of Thrones. He flies with a three-eyed crow and is briefly accosted by a golden-faced man who says, "The things I do for love." Bran sees his father at Castle Derry pleading with Robert, and he sees a golden man, a shadowy hound, and a stone giant. The dream is essentially, flying is good, Lannisters are bad. While the dream shows Bran events from far away, there is no accurate prediction of the future. Bran's second dream happens in Bran 4, A Game of Thrones. He cannot fly and he's hanging from a tall windowless tower. Stone lions are coming after him. Again, flying is good, Lannisters are bad, with no prediction of the future. Bran's third set of dreams aren't told to us in detail. In Bran 6, we learn that he's been having nightmares about his wildling attackers from the Wolf's Wood. Again, there's nothing about the future. Bran's fourth set of dreams is where the three-eyed crow brings Bran down to the crypts. At first glance, this seems like a prediction of Ned's death, but Ned is actually already dead at this point, so it predicts nothing. The dream simply brings information from far away to Bran. Again, there's no prediction of the future. Bran's fifth set of dreams happens in Bran 1, A Clash of Kings. Bran now has two types of dreams, wolf dreams and a werewood calling him. Again, there's no prediction of the future. Bran's sixth set of dreams is the crow pecking at Bran's forehead and saying fly or die. The golden man appears again, saying the things I do for love. Again, flying is good, Lannisters are bad. No prediction of the future. Bran's seventh set of dreams are wolf dreams, and there's no prediction of the future. Jojen and Mira arrive, and Jojen claims he's been dreaming of a winged wolf being held down by a stone chain. Assuming that stone chain is a callback to the stone lions, this is again, flying is good, Lannisters are bad, and no prediction of the future. Jojen then claims he's had a dream about Bran receiving dinner from Maester Luwin. Bran receives a prime cut of meat, while the Frey boys receive a bad one, and yet the Frey boys enjoyed their dinner more than Bran. Now later, Bran does quite a bit of mental gymnastics in order to fit some events into this prophecy. Luwin later tells Bran and the Frey boys that Robb has won a great victory, but Stevron Frey has died. The Frey boys don't seem to care. Bran interprets this as the Freys enjoying their news more than Bran. Of course, this isn't really accurate. The Frey boys are indifferent to Stevron Frey's death. They're not happy about it, and even if one argues that Big Walder wants to be Lord, Little Walder doesn't think he'll ever be Lord. And Bran isn't unhappy with his dinner. In fact, his dinner has nothing to do with the fact that he's unhappy. Bran is disquieted by the fact that Asha said that Robb is marching his army the wrong way. Robb winning or losing in the south has nothing to do with that. But even if these events perfectly fit Jojen's dream, it doesn't matter. We have no idea when the Battle of Oxcross was relative to Jojen's dream. Just like Ned's death, the dreams are just communicating something from far away, not from the future. With Jojen's third dream, we finally get a prediction that's somewhat impressive. Jojen predicts that the sea will come to Winterfell, and that Alebelly, Septon Shale, and Mikken will be drowned. It should be noted that neither Mikken nor Alebelly are drowned. Bran thinks that Mikken drowns on his own blood when he's stabbed in the back of the neck, but that's actually impossible, as drowning takes several minutes. And Alebelly simply was not drowned, not even metaphorically. The only drowning prediction that's correct is Septon Shale, but that one's kind of expected considering that Theon plans on making an offering to the drowned god. Assuming that Jojen is being honest about when he had this vision, the only thing that's impressive is knowing that Theon is coming to Winterfell. After all, Theon only seems to come up with this idea in Theon 3, yet Jojen seems to know about it before he even makes it to Winterfell, before Theon even has the notion. How could anyone predict that Theon would have such a stupid plan? How could anyone predict that Theon would have such warped judgment and reason? How could anyone predict that he would turn against his foster brothers? How could anyone predict that such foolish plans would be put in the minds of men? Now, one could argue that the Three-Eyed Crow has the magical ability to predict the future, but if he had that ability, why was he wrong about Mikken and Alebelly? It seems more likely that the Children of the Forest are like the haranguin mines, or the Janeshee, or the Greywater fungus. They sent Jojen a dream, and then warped Theon's reason and judgment to fulfill that dream. It certainly would explain why Theon had such a stupid plan. Now you may be asking, with all of this talk about hive-minded races and telepathic treachery, is it possible that Ice and Fire is actually sci-fi? Well, we'll talk about that and the rest of Bran and Jojen's dreams in Part 3.